The assembly hall breathed with history. Tall, arched windows let sunlight pour in, casting fractured mosaics across the polished wooden floor. Chandeliers swayed faintly from the ceiling, and carved panels whispered of generations of students who had walked these halls. But on this morning, no one admired the beauty. A thick silence pressed down like a storm waiting to break. All eyes were fixed on the new teacher. Miss Avery stood at the lectern, steady and composed, though her heart raced beneath her crisp white blouse. This was her first day in front of the entire academy. She was young, maybe too young in the eyes of those who whispered about her in the corridors. But there was something in her eyes, a quiet fire, an unspoken strength, that stilled the restless crowd. The silence shattered. A scoff from the back, followed by deliberate, heavy footsteps. Students turned their heads as a tall figure in a crimson varsity jacket strode forward. Noah Whitmore. The principal's son. The untouchable king of the academy. His smirk was carved with arrogance, his shoulders squared with the confidence of someone who believed rules bent for him alone. Without hesitation, Noah climbed the stage. He didn't wait to be acknowledged, didn't care about decorum. His hand slammed into the lectern, shoving it hard. Papers flew into the air like startled birds, scattering across the polished floor. Gasps filled the hall. Miss Avery stumbled but didn't fall. Her hand caught the edge of the lectern, grounding herself. The smirk widened on Noah's face. He had done this before. Teachers came and went, each one worn down by his defiance. None had lasted long. This one would be no different. But then she spoke. 5 words. Quiet, measured, but sharp enough to cut through his performance. You sound just like him. The air froze. Noah's smirk faltered, confusion flashing across his face. The students whispered, craning to catch every detail. Who was she talking about? Why did Noah suddenly look as if the ground had shifted beneath him? He clenched his fists, his voice breaking. What did you say? Miss Avery leaned closer, her voice low but steady. You sound just like him. The man who thought being feared meant he was strong. Noah's jaw tightened. He wanted to retaliate, to mock her, but something in her tone unsettled him. He couldn't move. Couldn't speak. With a sharp turn, he stormed out of the hall, leaving a trail of silence in his wake. Miss Avery bent down, calmly gathering her scattered papers, though her hands trembled slightly. She straightened, looking out over the sea of stunned faces. I came here to teach more than facts, she said firmly. I came here to remind you that power without respect destroys everything it touches. Some of you have been taught the wrong lessons about power. But it's never too late to learn the right ones. The assembly ended in a blur of whispers. For the students, it was just another scandal. For Miss Avery, it was the beginning of something much deeper. If stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe to Soul Touch Stories. Every week we share heartfelt, cinematic tales that leave an imprint on your soul. Now, back to our story. Noah didn't return to class that day. But his absence spoke louder than his presence ever had. The academy buzzed with gossip. Some admired Miss Avery's courage. Others whispered that she wouldn't last long. No one who crossed Noah Whitmore did. But Miss Avery had seen something in his eyes that morning. Beneath the arrogance, beneath the cruelty, she had glimpsed something raw. Pain. Fear. Loneliness. She recognized it because she had lived it. At night, in her small apartment lit only by a desk lamp, she stared at the ceiling. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. The man who had ruled her childhood with an iron fist. Who had believed that breaking others proved his strength. She had escaped him, but the scars lingered. Noah's shove at the lectern had ripped open an old wound, but also reminded her of her vow. She would not let another boy grow into that same shadow if she could help it. Over the following weeks, Noah tested her. He arrived late to class, dragging his chair across the floor with deliberate screeches. He whispered jokes to make his classmates laugh, scoffed when she spoke, and occasionally tossed her questions designed to trip her. But every time, Miss Avery countered with patience. When he mocked, she responded with quiet truth. When he sneered, she met him with unwavering calm. It wasn't the reaction he expected. Anger would have fueled him. Punishment would have been a badge of honor. But her steady gaze disarmed him. Slowly, the students noticed. Noah, the boy who once ruled with intimidation, suddenly seemed less certain. Still, he didn't give in easily. His pride was armor, and he wasn't ready to let it go. Until the day courage became her lesson. Your assignment, Miss Avery said one Friday, was to write an essay on courage. She looked around the room. Courage isn't loud. It isn't flashy. It's often quiet, small, and invisible. It's the hardest thing we carry. Papers shuffled across desks. Except Noah's. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a defiant grin on his lips. I don't do homework for teachers who won't last a semester, he declared. Laughter rippled through the room. Miss Avery didn't flinch. Instead, she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. She walked it over to him and laid it on his desk. This, she said softly, was written by someone who also thought school was beneath him. Until he realized courage wasn't about being strong, it was about admitting weakness. Noah's chair creaked as he sank into it. His classmates stared at him, not with fear, but with curiosity. For the first time, the mask had cracked. Noah lowered his face into his hands. The days that followed were different. Noah was quieter, his arrogance softened by something heavier. He lingered after class once, standing awkwardly as the last students filed out. Why did you say that? That day at the lectern, he asked, his voice lower than she had ever heard it. Miss Avery looked at him gently. Because you reminded me of someone who hurt me. And I didn't want to see you become him. Noah swallowed, his eyes glistening. What if, it's too late? She shook her head. It's never too late. The hardest battles are the ones inside you. But you don't have to fight them alone. For the first time, Noah let the silence sit between them without filling it with mockery. Transformation wasn't instant. It never is. Noah stumbled often. He lashed out some days, retreated on others. But each time, he returned with apologies that once would have been unthinkable. Slowly, the walls crumbled. His classmates began to see him differently. He helped pick up fallen books. He stood up for a boy he had once mocked. He even stayed after school to tutor a younger student in math. It wasn't perfection. It was progress. And progress, Miss Avery knew, was the truest form of courage. Months later, the same hall that had once echoed with the sound of a lectern shoved aside became the stage for something new. Noah stood at the front, microphone trembling in his hand. The entire school watched. I used to think power meant making people afraid of me, he began, his voice unsteady. But someone showed me that real power is what you do when you realize you've been wrong. Miss Avery, thank you. The applause was thunderous. Tears streaked down faces that had once laughed at cruelty. For the first time, Noah Whitmore wasn't the principal's son. He was just a boy who had found the strength to change. And at the back of the hall, Miss Avery closed her eyes, whispering, "You sound nothing like him anymore." If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Soul Touch Stories. Every voice of support helps us keep sharing tales that matter. Miss Avery left the hall quietly. She didn't need the spotlight. She carried her victory in silence. Not the victory of defeating Noah, but of saving him from becoming someone else. Someone she once knew too well. As the sun streamed once again through the stained glass windows, painting the floor in colors of hope, she felt lighter. The ghost of her father's voice faded in the light. Cycles could be broken. Pain didn't have to pass down forever. And sometimes, the most powerful changes begin with the simplest words. 5 words that froze arrogance. 5 words that opened a wound. 5 words that planted the seed of change. You sound just like him. And those 5 words rewrote not just Noah's story, but hers too.